And we are back with another episode of the Life Choose Your Ultimate Own Adventure game. I think I said it out of order, but Daphne,
It doesn't matter.
I made a decision. I'm changing the name of the podcast.
And you know what? I'm here for it. I'm here for the whole thing. It does not matter.
What are we talking about for season 2, episode 2?
Yeah, we are talking about decisions. And I really put it through this lens, like playing the game of decisions. Playing the game of making decisions, right? All day long, we're making decisions. Some that seem small, maybe, if we judge them that way, some that seem big. Primarily, the decisions we've made about our career. You've recently made a new decision with your dang
Hobby,
it. Thank you. Hobby.
amateur radio.
Thank you. Amateur radio. I was going to say broadcasting. I'm like, it's not broadcasting. Amateur radio. I've been learning, by the way, about this amateur radio thing from you. So I have a lot of appreciation for you this morning, Cliff.
I have a lot of appreciation for you as well.
Yeah, thank you. Cliff does manage the back end of the show in terms of, it's kind of the recording stuff that we're doing and technology. So I just appreciate so much that you just do it so effortlessly, which I know has taken you hundreds of hours to learn. You're effortless because you're a master at it. So we're talking about decisions, right? How we make decisions, and we're gonna do an interesting twist on it as we think about all the things that influence our decisions, and in particular, as it primarily through the lens of work. That's what you and I spend a lot of time talking about, right? Our work in the world, how people are finding meaningful work. Are they a solopreneur? Are they working for themselves, building a business? Are they working for somebody else? How we get the best out of this life. And we're going to add in this nuance around the idea of status as we talk about this idea of how we're making decisions and how much influence that can have on us at a.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
Daphne, what stood out to you during the intro today?
This dynamic duo.
Okay, gotcha. I was not present at all with the intro this morning. I was hyper fixated. That's my new term. I'm really hyper fixated on the terminology of hyperfixation. I was hyper fixated on the terrible timing that I did on bringing the jingle in. I was like, okay, is that my cue to jump into the button pressing? And
yeah, we're just always improvising.
It is. You know what? I made the decision to hit the button, and was it the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? These are the kinds of things we're going to talk about today.
It is. And man, how does it feel when you think and start to believe that you've made the wrong decision?
I know. I was already immediately thinking I am going to lose my status as an authority figure in podcast production quality as a result of the decision I made to cut you off mid-sentence when I thought you were finished, but you weren't. And if I only knew better, I would have made a different decision.
Wouldn't you have? Maybe. Yes. You nailed it. And when we talk about decisions, this is, I think, the greatest, and you tell me if it's true for you. I know it's been true for me. The greatest fear is that we're going to make the wrong decision.
It has been true for me for sure. At this point, and I know that we're going to get into this.
Yeah.
I have a new philosophy that has broken me from that fear. And that is, number one, I don't believe there is the right decision, and I don't believe there is a wrong decision. I think there are just decisions. And every decision in my perception today technically could be perceived as a right decision, because no matter what I decide, there will be results. Or I like to say, all beliefs have consequences. All decisions have consequences. All decisions lead to specific results.
Yes.
And
I like the word results.
I can work with results. either the results are what I desire and I celebrate and all that stuff, or I learn something that I didn't know before, such as, maybe wait for like a half a second pause before pressing the button. So moving forward, I will have I have learned from the
Mm.
error of my ways. No, it was a great learning experience. So in my way, I don't believe that there is a wrong decision.
Yeah, I don't either. So we're gonna get to that, but that is a fear that people have, right? Like, and I've lived into it too. I still can find myself, getting caught in that trap of the mind if I'm not aware of what's going on. And it is a real fear that, we will, and this is where the status part comes into this whole conversation, that we will make a decision, we will decide something. We're making decisions every day. And the decision that we make will lead to some sort of failure, and that failure will cause some level of humiliation, some level of, I guess I would just say, humiliation in our life, and we will carry some type of shame around that. It will look horrible in the eyes of everyone, and essentially we will lose any status that we had.
That is definitely one narrative that we as creators could put into our mind. And it is the narrative that of catastrophizing what could go wrong if I decide this. That used to lead me into a lot of anxiety, fear, overwhelm, doubt, lack of
Yes.
confidence, and
Yes.
quite frankly, it kept me perceived as stuck, and it was not a fun way to live.
It's not. I don't think it is. And it's also on both sides. We kind of do this whole thing in the show where we're like, and how do we also go about making decisions? We are going to make decisions. Does that mean that we are just throwing caution to the wind and we just decide randomly and that's how we go about making decisions? I don't necessarily ascribe to that either.
Nor do I. I like to have well-informed decisions
Yes.
in and also knowing that when I actually come to a decision, and there's something that I didn't see in the notes that I'd love to bring in, and that is uh, the root word of decision
Yeah.
or decide. And the original root word, I think it might be Latin, but it was
It is.
scission, means to cut. So kind of like scissors is, and so when you make a decision, you're cutting off any other outcome other than what you've decided, what your decision was about. Then the root word of decide is CID, and that means to kill. So there's homicide, pesticide, and those words. And so when I decide in my mind, I'm literally killing all of the thoughts of the other potential outcomes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, directions that I could have
Yeah.
gone. I have
Yeah.
decided this is my path, and now I'm on that path. I've in my mind, I've cut off what are the possibilities of all the other things. This decision has been made.
Yes. And that's it. I love it. We're going to talk about the derivation of the idea of um, status in a little bit.
Are we going to talk
We're just
about
going to do Latin all day on the show.
the multi? Are we going to talk about the multi-universe theory that every decision we could have made is actually happening in some parallel
Yeah.
universe?
Yeah. Talk about it right now. This is about
Okay.
the robots, isn't it?
No, it's not about the robots. It's there is a philosophy out there. Uh, I I don't necessarily say that I subscribe to it, but I don't necessarily say that I discount it, and I don't believe it. It's worth pondering in my mind. But the
Yeah.
idea that there is an infinite number of potential realities, and that anything and everything that could be experienced by our consciousness is or has been or will, given the fact that there is in this theory also no understand there is no time is relative.
Right.
So the idea is that everything that could possibly be decided, every variation of it, is actually all being played out
Yeah.
in and stuff like that. So I know
Have you
that
seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once?
yes,
I
that is an incredibly awesome movie.
I think they did in that movie one of the best depictions of that. I guess that potentiality that I think I've ever seen in any movie. I think a lot of movies have tried to do that and pull it off. where there's a lot of multiverses, and it gets they just did an exceptional job with it, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it sounds incredibly woo-woo and it's kind of out there, but I think it's fun to think about all of that. Now, with that being said, I'm in this version of reality,
Yeah.
whatever version this is, and who knows, it may be the only version of reality for all I know. But in this version of reality, I am living my life based upon the results of all of the various decisions that I've made throughout my lifetime. And it's not just the big ones. I mean, I am making decisions second by second about what word am I going to choose next when I speak. I'm making these words up as I go along. Every word is not pre-planned or scripted. I'm literally coming up with these words right here, right now, on the spot, and every single one of those is a decision.
Yeah. That's why I tell everyone they already are an improviser.
Yes.
I did improvisational theater for years, and other people are like, "Oh my gosh, I could never improvise." I'm like, "You're doing it right now." unless there's some cue card I can't see that you're reading off of. And also, let me bring this in. I think this is some of where I wanted to head. Also, all the decisions, where your life has ended up now, and I want to go back to this multiverse thing too. However, all the decisions that you also have not made. I did not choose where I was born.
Mhm.
I did not choose really. I mean, we could make some metaphysical argument. I don't want to make a comment on that, but I didn't, because I know that's where you're going to go.
You
I know
already
you're
knew
going
where
there.
Cliff's head was already
Yeah,
there.
I already was ahead of you. And, I didn't consciously, put it that way, intentionally choose a lot of things. I didn't choose the era that I was born in. I didn't choose the, land in which I was born, so on and so forth. Right. So and I think the beauty of that is that we can start to live into the causes and conditions, and we can also start to get, I think, into a level of acceptance that we are not necessarily in control of much, in control of everything. And there's a real important part to this, and this comes back to the idea of status. So there was a period of time in the world history when you were born into a bloodline. And that bloodline would dictate a lot of the status that you had, if not all of it. It would dictate the status that you had in your community, in the world, right? If you were born of nobility, you had a certain level, you were given a certain level of status that you didn't if you weren't. That was the game that people were playing. It switched at a certain time, and that became less of the way of it. Now it became, and I'm speeding ahead hundreds and hundreds of years. But now it became where everyone has the same, seemingly, opportunity. And what got lost in that, I think it's great, but what got lost in that was the influence that the world and that situations and circumstances can have at large on our life. And we sort of dismiss the idea of what I would call, and you might call it something else, but what I would call luck. That all the causes and conditions were just right and had to come together in a certain way for everything to work out like they did. And the more that I've understood causes and conditions, I think a little bit of what you were talking about, Cliff, the more that I've understood that causes and conditions have to be such for things to work out just like they are, that there's my influence on those, the decisions that I'm making, the things that I seem to be choosing, as well as a lot of other things I couldn't control beyond that it's amazing when things work out. It's incredible when they work out. So I think to just bring all of that into the conversation, and there are things that happen, much of which I don't control and have control over. So we'll talk about responsibility when we get there.
Well, one of the things that I do love about this is the fact that we are a part of a living organism called Earth.
Yeah.
And that when I think about it in that way, I'm a very small piece of the puzzle of everything
Yes.
that's going on as far as life on this planet.
Agreed.
And when I think about that, I think about I've done enough study to find out that there are organs in my body that seemingly have their own decision-making processes of
Yeah.
what to do and what to not do, that on my behalf are seemingly very involuntary. They're making their own decisions.
Like breathing.
Exactly. And well, and just so many other thing on a cellular level.
Yeah. Yes.
and when it comes to our immune system and things like that. And it's like, wow, I think of me as just as me this, but if I think of my body, well, my body is made up of a lot of different things that are making their own decisions. And so this is, I don't know why I feel led to share what came to me as you were talking about what's in our control and just how, we the situations are just what they are kind of things.
Mhm.
But when I think about me as a human being walking on this planet for, let's just say, well, at least 51 years and maybe 80, 90, 100 and some odd years, who knows how long I'll be here. But whatever I choose to do with my perceived free will and choice and decisions and the things that I think are in my control or not, but I can go out and I can impact things. And that's really no different than some of the things that are going on inside of my physical body. And so the metaphor is that there are either organs or cells inside of my body that are no different than me being a technical cell or a human on the planet Earth.
I
Did
love
that
that.
does that metaphor did that come out? Because in my head, that makes perfect sense. I don't know if I communicated it well.
I feel like you did. What how I as I how I was encapsulating as you're talking, so there's this macro, excuse me, micro and macro, right? And it just keeps there's sort of these what I would consider the micro sort of things that are happening at a cellular level, even beyond a cellular level, by the way, smaller than a cell.
Yep.
Those things are happening and we just kind of keep expanding. And then there's this more, the body, we could say, be more like the macro version of that. And that's all working together. And then there's this thing we call cliff that seems to be moving around and that's all working together. So I actually liked it a lot. That's how I
Yeah.
imagined it in my mind.
It
Yeah.
and for me, it helps to think about that because
Mhm.
when I like the philosophy of, that when coming from a Christian perspective and still having a lot of respect for so much of that teaching that I've adopted throughout my lifetime, there's this portion of the story of Jesus before he was arrested. He was praying in a garden. He says, "I pray that they would be one as you and I are one." And if that for me, that's really what life is all about, is to understand that we really are all one organism called life on this
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we could just understand that, and that when we Americans versus are combating against these people from a different country and stuff. It's like one part of our internal physical body going at war with another internal physical part of our body, and basically hoarding resources and all this other stuff and keeping it all to my and it's like, listen, the whole body dies if this happens,
Yeah.
and we need to come together and we need to make decisions. Of course, I say this I want to make decisions where I'm not putting the entire body at risk. And when I mean the entire body, the whole human race, the whole life on this planet.
Yeah. I would love to do that, except I'm just too busy going after my own status right now. I'm being funny, but I really do appreciate what you're saying because in my experience, that's true. And I think even at a more microcosmic level, and I think this will get into the first step of how to make decisions. This was a perfect lead in because even at a more microscopic level, let's come back to this entity over here, right? The Daphne entity, this thing that's hanging out over here. Even when I'm making, quote, making, seeming to make decisions that aren't aligned, like I start cutting off part of the body of myself.
Yeah.
I start losing part of myself. So, one of the first sort of places to look when we're considering decisions is what do I ultimately value in this life? Do I only value my own, what's important to me? Am I going after just to get mine sort of thing? Am I going to value and place my ego and my identity and status over other beings? I think that's what you're pointing to
Yeah,
some
that's
degree.
exactly what I'm pointing to.
Yeah. Is that what I value? Do I value more of my status in my work life, the title that I have, more than I value the time and the space and the energy that I have to be with my children or to be with my family? I mean, these are all of the things that, are I think the first places to look. And I really love that. I'll call it a metaphor, that metaphor of just cutting off the body, right? Like the whole existence that we have. And so where do we start sort of cutting ourselves off? versus the option of making decisions that actually continue to allow us to flow, that continue to allow us to expand. And I think the first place to look is at what we value in our life. And I think that's the first place to go after making. That would be my first recommendation to anyone.
The When it comes to values, one
Yeah.
of the areas that was very eye-opening to me was going through an exercise that I learned from Tony Robbins when I went through Date with Destiny.
Yeah.
And it's called the moving towards and moving away from values exercise, where he helps you understand the difference between means values and ends values. And the means values is the vehicle to get to the end. So the means to the end. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people say, "Hey, what are your what are your highest values?" And somebody will say family and work and whatever. And those are actually means values, which are you could create a list. Oftentimes we have lists of our values that are the means, but really what helped me essentially go down the to the deeper level beyond that is what's the ends value. And what he suggested in this exercise is what we're going after is the emotions. What are
Yeah.
the emotions that we most want to move toward and experience in life? That's our values. That's the ends values, are the emotional states. And what emotional states do we most want to avoid feeling and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing? And that's also our values, is because we make our decisions based upon what we think it will allow us to feel or avoid feeling. And
Yeah.
so when you think about family, it's connection and love, and those are the ends values. So this in this exercise, he's like, okay, in life in general, what's most important for you to feel? And I remember like financial certainty was at the top of the list, and then
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and then significance and meaning, and it went down the line in connection and all of those things. And then what's most important for you to avoid feeling? Humiliation, shame and guilt, and on down the line. And
Yeah.
then what he does in this exercise is he says, "Okay, now put those in the priority on the moving towards the things you most want to feel. Prioritize those in order of what you most want to feel, and then the same on the other side." And then this exercise is, now ask yourself, what must happen for you to feel the first thing in your moving towards list? And then what else has to happen? And what else and make a bullet point list of all the things that your subconscious mind will give to you of what you need to feel, or what must happen. And then what you'll have is an understanding of why you are making the decisions that you are making today. The Once you finish all of this, and you'll also on the moving away, what could happen for you to feel the thing you don't want to feel. But once you have this entire exercise done, now you recognize, wow, this answers all the questions as to why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling and the decisions that I'm making. And then to realize that every single thing on that list, not once in any schooling ever did I ever sit down and say, "Okay, these are my values. I
Yeah.
consciously choose these for the rest of my life." They
Yes.
were just organically adopted throughout our lifetime.
Bingo.
And then you realize, hey, what if I could actually choose, what do I want my values to be? And in what priority, moving from this day forward, what do I want them to be? And also, what if you could change the rules of what must happen for you to feel that way and what could happen for you to feel that way, and to make the rules in such a way that where pretty much everything is within your control.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more that goes into depth. But anyway, values. What are values, and how did we get them?
It's so good. And the how did we get them is really a critical piece of this. And when you look at research, Daniel Kahneman's research and Tversky's research, I think he won a Nobel Prize, so it's the best. They really do show what we think we're being rational about, and this is the part of feeling and emotion. And they're like, look, we like to believe that we are making rational decisions, well thought out. Well, we're very discerning. And then you realize a lot of it, first of all, is driven by what you want to feel, what you want to experience, what you think, and I love it, what you think needs to happen for you to feel a certain way. And then you add into that a lot of our decisions are time bound. You add in that we really don't have all the information. We couldn't possibly have all the information that we would need to even make a rational decision anyway. You're adding in feeling and emotion to this. It's like, and then all the other culture influences, all the other things that are surrounding us. And what you just brought up, Cliff, around how intentional have we been in choosing a lot of these things anyway? Then you add in that we have all these rules and ways that we think needs to happen. Oh my gosh, it's an amalgamated mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was an amalgamated mess. In fact, one
Me
of the
too.
things that was eye-opening is when you say, what has to happen for you to feel this thing you want to feel? And
Yeah.
then the language is, what else has to happen? And you keep doing that until there's no more answers that come out. And then for me, for each one of there was like 5 to 9 different things that must happen, which
Yeah.
means that when you evaluate the list, if any one of those things, those rules are not met, then I don't feel the thing because all of them have to be met for me
Yeah.
to feel this. That explains why I'm not feeling peace ever or
Now,
very rarely.
now I understand how I've stacked the cards against myself.
And
Stacked
then
the deck.
on the moving away side, the thing
Yeah.
is what could happen, what else could happen, what else, and that language will lead you to a bullet point list of 5 to 7 things that could happen. And here's the interesting thing, for you to feel the negative emotion, only one of them needs to be triggered, and you
Yeah.
feel it. And this is why we're always seemingly feeling these negative things, because there's so many things that could trigger it, and we have way too many rules. Like, I'll never forget.
So
It's like,
many.
okay, I will finally feel this when one of mine for financial certainty. I will have enough money in savings to cover all of my current and future financial needs.
Yeah.
Do you
And
know that?
when you had it, weren't you just more relaxed?
Oh, yeah. Let me say this. Does anybody know what their future financial needs are?
No.
So
And even if you
therefore,
believe it,
yeah,
right. Then once you got it, then you got to play the game of, oh my God, I hope I don't lose it.
that's exactly right. Exactly. So, yeah, the rules were not something I consciously chose.
Yeah.
But wow, did I pick up a lot of things through watching television, through things that my friends at school said, things my teachers said, books that I've read, offhanded statements from people that I respect and love. And then, of course, there's different religious interpretations of ancient texts that seemingly give out the things that we should or should not think is right or wrong. And whew, I had a big old mess of a list.
Yeah. I think we all do. If we haven't taken the time, and I'm a big fan, and I know you are too, of reflection. And if we haven't taken the time and the space to tease these things out for ourselves, I think we all are. I think it becomes very, and there's stages of life and seasons of life, and that all makes sense to me. But I think what you were just describing too, Cliff, is just that again, that fear of being a nobody, that fear of being this person of no status in the world somewhere to somebody somehow. And how and what you the messages that you picked up along the way, which again, we all do, right?
Yeah, the status played in for me in that it's like, wow, I question some of the things that I'm being taught
Mhm.
from this particular group of people, but everybody else in this group seemingly doesn't question this. And if I bring up some of
Oof.
my concerns about adopting their standard belief of this, then all of a sudden it's like, I notice there's resistance in or there's not resistance. There's a blockage in the relationship. It's not as free flowing. I feel a little bit on the fringe. I'm not as
Yeah.
connected as what I see everybody else who just agrees to agree with this very. And I'm like, intellectually, I can't agree with that. And
Yeah.
so, how many times have I adopted something that doesn't even make sense to me? but I'm just going to choose to be in agreement with it. And I will even defend it publicly so that I can actually stay inside of this community and maintain the status of relationship I have with these people.
Yep, exactly. I mean, and that I don't know that there would be one, self included, person on the planet who has not had that experience
Yeah,
in one form
absolutely.
or another, right? I mean, in one way or another, like organization I work for, or the group that I think I belong to there, I fit in somewhere. So as long as I fit in somewhere, at least that's better than fitting in nowhere.
Yeah.
I have status at least somewhere. So it is a real thing, or a real experience that we can all have. And I think that's the advantage of making it conscious, making us aware that this is what's been happening. Again, to come back to just the exercise you described of really looking at what we value, looking at what is the experience that we really want to be having, what are the emotions that we really want to be feeling, and how dependent we have made our feeling states, how dependent we have made the peace, the joy, the calm, all of those things that we want to experience, how much we have put dependencies on those for things to happen in a certain way in the world. I think that's really part of the hook too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a game. And we're still going to make decisions, right? We're still going to do the stuff. We're going to do the work. We're going to get the job. We're going to have the career. We're going to play a game.
I
But I
do wanna
think that,
say one thing,
yeah,
we are gonna make decisions. The one thing that came for me as soon as we are gonna make decisions. This came up, Daphne.
yeah,
We're always going to make the same decisions unless we actually take time to evaluate what our values are and
yes,
make changes. Because I felt like it's important before we move on to say that our values is actually what dictates the decisions that we make.
yeah.
And we can actually say, you know what? No, I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to work out more often. And this is where a lot of people make New Year's resolutions and
Oh,
they say,
geez.
I'm going to use my willpower
Oh,
to do this. And for several weeks or several months, they do, but they haven't changed their actual values. They haven't changed their beliefs about what eating healthy or eating their food means. And they
yeah,
haven't changed their values when it comes to how they feel going to the gym is going to meet their needs emotionally and what that all means.
yeah,
So the problem is if you don't change the values, your focus, attention, and willpower will only carry you so far because eventually you'll want to focus your attention and energy and willpower on something else. And then your actual subconscious programming of your values will revert you back to the same decision making autopilot that you were on before.
yeah. That, I mean, 100% in my experience. And so and that is step one, really, of how do we go about making decisions? And that first step really is to evaluate, okay, what do I really value? What is the experience I really want in my life? How do deathbed, right? Like, what am I really wanting to happen here as best as I can influence it?
Yeah.
And well, we'll get to the responsibility part at the end. It's very
You
important.
mentioned deathbed and people who have near death experiences,
Hmm.
and I'm not talking about like the, glimpse into the life beyond metaphysical stuff. I'm talking about people who are confronted with, wow, I'm a mortal being here. I never once thought about the fact that I'm not guaranteed, car accident, whatever.
Yeah.
All those people get shaken up. Their values come into question and they start living more life in the present
Hmm.
than some perceived guaranteed future. And there's a lot of shift in decision making there, and it's because that experience of almost dying, whether it be in a car accident or what a surgery on a operating table or whatever, there's a lot of values that get shifted instantly, and then the decisions they're a different person on a different path in life
Yeah.
than prior to that event.
Yeah, I mean, and I've written about this and talked about it, just recognizing that death is staring me in the face all the time. It's inevitable. I don't know when it's gonna happen, can bring a whole new level of appreciation. Yeah.
I came very, close to the understanding yesterday with a ladder up against my house. I am literally on the precipice of potential death right here, right now. I was putting up a radio antenna on the back of my house. I'm like,
Of course you were.
this is so sketchy. I should not be here right now, but I've
Okay.
made this decision. This antenna
Yeah.
is going up tonight.
I'm up here now. Yeah, it is those moments,
I was
and
living in the moment.
living in the moment. We get to do stuff. We get to do stuff. We get to make some decisions. So step one is having a sense of what your values are, and it's very worth the time and the energy and the effort to take time to really reflect on that and speak to people who are important to you about it and make some decisions even about that first. And also to your point, Cliff, if you find, and I will tell you, some of the greatest suffering that I have gone through in my life has been when I've made decisions and got too far away from what I really want, and I say it this way, wanted to value. In other words, when I was making decisions that were outside of me consciously choosing what I valued, I had taken on the values of my culture and taken on the values of other people and taken on oh geez, let's just talk about the valuing achievement over anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That
That's
I had done it as well. I mean,
yeah.
we're conditioned. It's interesting. Gosh, I don't even know. Okay, that's interesting that I felt resistance within to even say something that I've had as a thought lately. And
Mm,
if anything, it's like, "Oh, what are people gonna perceive about Cliff Ravenscraft if he says this out loud?"
yeah.
I just caught that inside of myself. I'm still gonna say it though.
Good.
All right?
You know
So
why? It's our
why?
show. We can do whatever we want.
I know we can. So, I have gosh, I am gonna say this, and wow, is I am finding some real resistance. I am finding today as a 51-year-old adult, I question the idea of pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States of the America.
Hmm.
And here's why I say that, is because, well, gosh, from the time I was a kid, hand over heart, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United, and memorized day after day, every day in school, required all of this stuff. And and by the way, I'm very proud to be an American. I am very proud of the freedoms that we have. I recognize the sacrifices that have been made
Mhm.
and stuff like that. But at some level, the question is my identity so tied that if my country makes a decision to, let's just say, take a war related activity against another country, that all of a sudden, well, hey, regardless of my own personal convictions, based upon my own beliefs and stuff like that, it's like, I don't know that I pledge allegiance to this flag that represents this country who's doing something that is so against my own consciousness.
Mhm.
And so today it's like, okay, do I pledge allegiance to this flag, to this country, and that's my identity. And for at some level, there's this part of me, it's like, I'm this, you're that, therefore my allegiance is over here, regardless of the fact that you're a human just as much as I'm a human. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, it does. And I think, I don't know about pledging allegiance to a thing. I think, I think maybe it's metaphorical. Like I pledge allegiance. Well, I've never really thought about it, to be honest with you.
It came
Pledge allegiance to what?
I
You
just
know?
got my amateur
What?
radio license, and I went to an amateur radio club,
Okay.
and quite frankly, the amateur radio is very much, a hobby where there's a lot of, uh, gentlemen more than women. That has been my experience, at least as far as I know, and
Mhm.
seems to be a lot of people who are, in the had been in the military.
Oh,
And
sure.
so and one of the things that they do at the beginning of the meeting is, okay, let's all stand up and do a pledge of allegiance to the flag. And I'm like, how do I feel about this?
It's a
I
great question.
and that's the key. I just want to say this. It's a question. It's
Yeah.
not something like I'm anti America. I'm not anti any, there's no specific thing right now. But I will just say, it's like, wow, I would have never questioned this in the past.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my values today are oneness and unity among all humanity, and not my pledge of, if I pledge allegiance to the human race, is what
Yeah.
I would like to say.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, again, not to get too far down the road, part of the world in which you and I live, I have not lived in any other country except the United States. I was born into the United States. I've never lived in any other country. I certainly have never lived in a country that is not a democracy. I don't know what it's like to live in a country where there's a dictatorship.
Right.
So, you know, and I don't know that I want to experience that. If I'm being honest, from what I've
Here's
seen,
why this comes up
record.
for me.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I've been in podcasting since 2005. I was in
Mhm.
blogging since 1996.
Yeah.
I've used internet communications to connect with people outside of my country for
Mhm.
many years. Throughout all of my time, I have had clients in Qatar. I've had clients in Saudi Arabia. I've
Sure.
had conversations with people in Pakistan, and people all throughout the world. And you know what? They're all human just like me.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget just how shocked I was to learn that it's possible to build a meaningful relationship with another human being in another planet, in spite of the fact that I've been taught that they're the enemy from early childhood.
Yeah, I think that's the unfortunate part of a narrative that can start to take place. Let me distill it down. I went through this even working for a company that I worked for, where our competitor in every meeting, our competitor was talked about as they're the losers, we're going to kick their asses. We're the best. They're not the best. And then we bought them. And now we were all expected to work really well with one another.
Yeah.
So you have to question, and
Well,
why I'm bringing that up is you have to question these narratives,
you
right?
have yeah, you have to
Yeah,
question the narratives, and you expected to work well with one another. So,
after years.
Japan and the United States, right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting. I just purchased a brand new amateur radio for my because I got my amateur radio license, and it's a Yaesu radio made in Japan. And it's one of the most popular brands of amateur radios. And you've got these people who used to fight in a war against Japan, right?
Mhm.
And now I'm sitting here listening to radio conversations with people who literally fought in a war against each other, having chit chat today on the radio. Do you see?
Thank goodness.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's worthy to question. I think it's worthy to also keep in mind that again, in terms of forces, to not mix up government, policy, all these different things with an individual human being. And so
Yep.
what does that all mean? I don't know. I don't have the answers to all that. I do know that standing for every human being's right to thrive in their life is probably a good idea. Whatever that means, as best as you can do it. So I
It
think it's great to ask those questions.
Yeah, and what the whole thing that brought this up is it's like the decision. It's like, huh, do I stand up and do I pledge? Quite frankly, it's the first time I've been asked to do the Pledge of Allegiance
Yeah.
since I was in elementary school, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, you never thought
I'm
about
l
it.
I'm
You just
like,
did it.
how well, I didn't do it I did not do it yeah, back then I just did it, but
Right.
this time I did not just do it. I'm literally asking myself, "Do I pledge my allegiance to the" and that just seems like such a huge commitment, and let me ponder this. It's kinda like, do I pledge allegiance to my wife to live life faithful it's that level of language, and I'm
Yeah,
like, "I don't know that I've ever consciously thought about this. I need some time to make a decision here."
there you go. Ask the question. I think that's it. For yourself.
See how I brought it back to decisions?
Yeah, it's so good. Well, it's relevant. I mean, we were talking about step 1. We haven't even gotten to the other 2 steps. Step 1 is just what you value. What are you ascribing and prescribing to? I mean, or subscribing to. I think that's really valuable, to think about those things. So, yeah, I'll be curious to see where you land.
I'll be curious to see what feedback I get.
Yeah. Well, people can get pretty charged up.
Cliff at
These things.
cliffravenscraft.com.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Just message away. Message away. Go crazy. Okay. So that's step 1. Right. And when people I did want to come back to this around status, whether that status in the group that you're, talking about here, where you suddenly lose status, now you're, all the different things they're going to say. There is that part of being, and I think this is important, and I had to get in touch with this, of being a snob.
Mm.
And this is where the luck and skill part comes into this whole thing with decisions. We make a decision, we think we're going to be really successful. And snob comes from, they used to write, when people were finally allowed to go get different forms of education, sign nobilitate. And what it means is no nobility. It means this person in this group has no bloodline of nobility, and we're going to call that out. That's actually where snob derived from, because then they got tired of writing the whole thing out, and they just put S hyphen knob. It's funny.
This person's a knob.
This
not
person's
a
a
knob.
knob. Yeah, snob.
Not a knob.
Not a knob. So a snob, right? So and that's where the word snobbery really comes from. So when we're sort of dismissing, and then as the context was changing around, well, now everybody has equal opportunity to be successful, and you weren't successful. You have the same opportunity, but now you're broke, or you can't afford your home, or all these sorts of things. You're not driving the nicest car like everybody else in the neighborhood is driving. Now you're judged as a failure. So I like bringing these things, these contextual things into the conversation, so that we can understand a little bit more about what starts to drive our decision making.
Yeah, and a lot of
Yeah.
that has to do with our agreement of the standards of what it
Yes.
means to be successful and
Yes.
things like that.
Yes. And in
And
the
that,
Western world, money and your title has seemed to mean a lot until it hasn't.
yeah,
Yes. Yes. Okay. Step 2. I think it is worthy of considering the potential outcomes, right? To do some maybe pros and cons, right? Striking sort of a balance that the Greeks would talk about, the golden mean, which is kind of the Goldilocks idea, not too
mhm.
much, not too little, but weighing our different decisions and thinking about, well, I think this is where your multiverse idea where this comes in, of all the different realities that I could be living with this decision. If I make decision A, if I make decision B, decision C, D, what are all the ways that this could play out? I think it's worthy of taking time to do that too.
Yeah, this is where you can use what's called the Dickens process.
Oh.
And that's a term I picked up also from Tony Robbins, and he pulled out from the story of Ebenezer Scrooge,
Mhm.
the idea of you got the 3 ghosts. It's like, okay, here's your past. All right.
Yeah.
This is what you've experienced in the past. And the decisions you've made there, and the influences that caused you to make those decisions. This
Yeah.
is your current experience of life. All right. And based upon here, what decisions you make now will give you some future outcome. And so that Ghost of Christmas Future showed, based upon the decisions that you're making right now, this is the timeline for which you will experience. And of course, Scrooge saw that timeline and is like, okay, I am definitely changing my decisions in the present moment,
Yeah.
because that's not an outcome I want.
Yeah. And I love all the different variations of the movies that they've done on that too.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And Patrick Stewart, I think, is my favorite.
Yeah. Did you see Spirited with Will Ferrell?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought they did a really great, a real great iteration of that too. Right.
Yeah.
The idea of him being an unredeemable character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was so great, and that he previously was. So,
Yeah.
love it. Dickens process. Yeah, and I think it's worth weighing those decisions. So that's kind of step 2. It's like, you're working on your values. You're starting to understand that. You're understanding the waters in which you had been swimming previously. You're taking into consideration what your present is right now, and then you're going to make some, like, I love a good pros and cons list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
And
it just imagine in your mind, imagine if I don't make any changes to my values now, my
Mhm.
decisions moving forward are going to pretty much stay the same. And there's enough history and track record that I can make some sort of prediction about where am I going to be in 5, 10, 15 years from now,
Yeah.
or on my deathbed.
Yeah.
And then really live into that, journal about it, meditate on it,
Yes.
create
Yes.
that picture. And then the decision that you are facing right now, Should I go over? Should I move to this city and take that job, or should I uh, completely shift my focus on what it is that I do for a living and income, and go outdoors more versus the inside sitting in front of a computer work all the time.
Yeah.
All of the different things you could now imagine that you made the decision to do that, and then just create pictures in your mind, visualize what all that might lead to, and
Yeah.
live into it, feel it, breathe it, smell it, touch it, make it real in your mind, and ask yourself, which of these two do I desire?
Yeah. Should I continue to be a rageaholic, or might I want to get some
Some therapy.
some therapy, some purchase on my emotional state? I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I do think that is, and this is the power of imagination. I mean, this is one of the gifts that we have, as far as they know. We're the only ones that have it as humans on the planet, to imagine a future, to prospect, to think about, and then to bring into reality. And this is where the existentialist movement came into being, I think, to bring into reality what wasn't here before, to
Yes.
make it real. We were talking about jobs and things, but there's also that part of just how we show up to life. If I continue on this path of being disagreeable, if I continue on this path of being difficult to get along with, right? All these sorts of things, what am I asking? What can I pretty much predict my life will look like in 5 or 10 years from now? Very valuable, valuable
Yes, it is.
exercise. Yes. Okay, so that's second. And then we'll use some evidence. And now this is really where I want to I'm going to bring us back into history a little bit about all these different philosophies that have threaded themselves, that we may not that waters in which we swim, which we may not be aware of. When we talk about decisions, and we've made a very, I think, important point here about what we have control over, right? And I loved you said, like, change the rules so that everything you want to experience can be true. We're not quite so dependent. We do this sort of reframe. The existentialist movement brought this forth, and I am completely being totally reductionist with everything that the philosophers had talked about in that movement.
Oh,
Nevertheless,
you
what
could
they
cover it all in 15 minutes, can't you?
okay, I think so. Let's start with Jean Paul Sartre, and really what they talked about at the essence of it was our responsibility. And I think this is how I like to reframe this: is our ability to respond.
Yeah.
Our ability to respond to the causes and conditions and the things that come our way that we really can't control. I think this is where they really nailed it, honestly, in that I seem to be making decisions. I give a lot of, and psychologists know this too. We don't even really know all the reasons that we're making decisions. I think the emotional part of it is a real good indicator, though. I want to feel a certain thing. I want to feel a certain way. And then to realize there are so many causes and conditions and things that are happening that I don't get to control all of them. I will make a decision to take this, and this is probably one. I made a decision one time in my life to take this promotion, and I thought I weighed things pretty good. And there were just certain things that happened that I'm like, oh, this is not what I want at all. I didn't see any of this coming, right? And so at that moment, it's what's my ability to respond?
Mhm.
How able am I in that moment, in the face, and this is the whole point, in the face of new information? What is my capacity to respond? How well can I show up to that moment to go, oh wow, now I have a new data point. I didn't have that data point when I made this decision before. I have it now. And I think that's a part of just being able to live into our ability to respond in any moment and to change, to make a different decision. That's why I think it's one big game, because you just don't know all the pieces. You
Yeah.
can't.
Well, if I think about what inspired, because you and I had a dialogue about the name of this podcast,
Yeah.
Life, the Ultimate Choose Your Own Adventure Game.
Yes.
And in our dialogue, I talked about the fact that I never really read a lot of these, but I was at least, I was introduced to the concept of storybooks that were choose your own adventure. It's like, okay, so you're at this point now, which do you choose? Do you want to go here or do you want to go here? If you go to here, if you go to A, go to page 53. If you
Yeah.
want to go to B, go to page 73. And then you make your way and weave through a story and stuff like this. But the one thing you can't do is to keep backtracking your pages and stuff like that. It's like you just stay in this line, and it's like, okay, but let me take what I've learned along this journey. Now, the thing is, had you gone down some other things, you would have learned different life lessons. You would ultimately have a different version of who you are.
Yeah.
But we have to stop beating ourselves up for the decisions that we made and
Yes.
take the responsibility for that and say, well, I am who I am because of this. One of the things, Daphne, people have asked me a lot in interviews when they say, Cliff, man, you've been in podcasting, you jumped into this new career, self-employment after being 12 years in a family-run business where you're going to take that over that. Take us back, and if you were able to go in a time machine and go and have a conversation with yourself in the first 2 months of your business, what would you tell yourself so that you could avoid some of the, like, maybe one of the biggest mistakes that you've made?
Hmm.
And I said, "I hope such a time machine does not exist." And they're like, "Tell me more." And I said,
Yeah.
"Well, I as crazy as this may sound, I really love my life, and I love who I am. And while, yes, there were decisions that I made in those first few months and first few years of business that at the time I regretted, that at the time caused me a lot of pain, a lot of heartache, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I almost died in the hospital. I mean, there were some really difficult results that came from some really stupid and ill-informed decisions. But wow, how I grew through those experiences make me the person I am today. I'm more compassionate today. I'm more
Hmm.
tolerant. I'm more loving. I'm more caring. I'm less judgmental.
Yes.
And if I wouldn't have made, I would be just as arrogant, self-serving, and less compassionate. And so I hope you never create a time machine to allow me to go back and avoid those things.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of those moments when when we can come to them and look back at them with exactly what you just said. I mean, your ability to look back and to have compassion for yourself, to say, I couldn't have done it any other way. Because probably if I could have, I would have. Probably. You know what? I don't think you would have intentionally chosen suffering for yourself. I wouldn't have
Very
either.
rarely,
Yeah,
very
very
rarely.
rarely do I intentionally choose
That
suffering. Now I'm not
I
talking about challenge and
No,
and
I'm saying fairly rarely. There is a philosophy that, more pain, more gain. And
well,
w and there also is and I came up in a Christian faith, and
mhm,
there is a there is a certain segment of where I grew up where suffering is seen as a
yes,
good thing.
yes, I'm aware of that
So
philosophy for
so uh,
sure.
so uh, I do want to say that I intentionally chose to suffer and
Mhm,
felt good about my suffering
yeah,
because I felt like I was suffering for a purpose.
sure. I mean, weren't Adam and Eve kicked out and they had to go work? Wasn't that wasn't that like their consequence? Like, they're sending you to work. Not 8 to 8 every day. Um, yes, I'm aware that that can exist. Nevertheless, I do think that when you go back and look back, there's a certain level of compassion for yourself. And at least what I heard that, there were just decisions you didn't know all the pieces and you were doing the best that you could do with the information and the skills that you had available at the time.
And that is where my compassion
Yes.
and unconditional love for others is possible.
Yeah.
When I recognize that everything I've ever done, ever said, I was always doing the best I could with what I had to work with at the time. And sometimes it's not that I didn't have the knowledge. It's not that I hadn't been taught that lesson through three other experiences and I kept making the same mistake over and over again. It's just that in the moment when I made the mistake the fourth time,
Mhm.
based upon my emotional state, based upon my energy levels, based upon the thoughts that were habitually going through my head. At that moment, in spite of what I knew, I still, for the fourth time, made the same mistake again. But I literally was doing the best with what I had to work with in that moment,
That's
because
right.
it's not just the knowledge of what is the perceived right thing to do. It's not just that you have to work with. It's the
No.
fact that what is my capacity to choose what
Yeah.
I know?
Yes.
And there's a lot chemically going on through our brain and through our body that factors into these things. And this is why I love how many episodes are we going to mention this? The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Every episode.
Every episode. So if you have not read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, go and read it. The fourth agreement: always do your best.
Yeah, always do your best. Always. And our best can be different. Our best can be different given the circumstances we're in. And this is where I wanted to, this is where I, sort of landed from a very sort of working through this piece by piece around decisions. Because of all of these factors and all the things that we've mentioned, it is impossible to make a wrong decision. It's impossible. Can't do it.
Yeah, and the thing that I will go even further into
Yeah.
is a lot of you mentioned in our outline, and I think at the beginning of this episode as well, that some of the times when we're facing a decision, we fear that the decision is going to lead to failure.
Hmm.
And while I also love um, we can't make a wrong decision. I also have this belief that there's no such thing as failure. There's only learning from the results.
I agree. I agree. And when we can get past our own, and I hear it in your voice, when we can get past our own snobbery and the blaming of ourselves and the
And
blaming
others.
and others, exactly. When we can get past that and recognize that we are just all making decisions, we're following different paths at different times. The context that is like sand shifting under our feet that we sometimes can't even recognize at first. That we really truly are in this game. We're just making these decisions moment by moment, given the context that we're in, given the information we have at the time, the time amount available, and we're all doing the best that we can to make these decisions. And hopefully, we're making the wisest ones that we can. But it's just impossible to fail and make the wrong one. It's
Yeah.
impossible. Yeah.
And
So don't
and
worry
to
about it.
so yeah, don't worry. Be happy. Cue Bobby
Let's just
McFerrin.
just distill it all down to that. So it helps. It helps to have a path. It helps to have sort of, okay, and how do I do this, at least to some degree, so I can get some purchase on it and then recognize that the other side of it. It's both. It's the yin and the yang side of this whole thing that I think is
Yes.
very helpful. Yes.
So Daphne, I want to close with 3 action items that
Okay.
I wrote down before we started today.
Do it.
The first action item: reflect on what your personal values are. The second thing is practice mindful decision making, and that's where you can evaluate and visualize your future and what happens if you don't make this decision. And then embrace responsibility. Understand that, hey, I am making this decision. It's the best decision with what I currently have to work with, including my emotional state in the moment. And
Yes.
whatever the results are, I take responsibility. So those are the 3 action items. Reflect on your personal values, practice mindful decision making, and embrace responsibility.
Yes. Your ability to respond. I
Yes.
think, yeah, I want to say a little bit about responsibility because I think it has gotten this sort of strange flavor over the top of it to me, which it sort of sounds like a hard ass sort of thing, like you need to take responsibility. Well, and I guess it's more when people are trying to assign you responsibility
Mhm.
or you're trying to assign responsibility to someone else, which you cannot do, by the way. People must take it. So it's living into that, like you're taking it for yourself.
Yeah.
And there's that compassion that comes along with it that I think is very important. Yes.
Yeah.
Your ability to respond.
I do like the responsibility, the idea of it's maintain your ability to respond to
Yeah.
the situation. And I would say for me, taking responsibility is maintaining my ability to respond
Yeah.
regardless of who might have influenced the current
Yes.
situation or circumstance.
Yes. It is true responsibility is this is what's the word I'm looking for? True responsibility carries no weight of blame, criticism, and judgment.
Yes, that
Yes.
beautifully said.
Thank you. It took everything I had.
I love it. I love it. Uh, Daphne, what is your call to action?
My call to action is to remind it for if you've been with us to remind you that I'm over on Substack. I have another essay that will come out tomorrow evening. Today's Tuesday that we're recording this, will come out tomorrow evening. So every other week. So I want to just keep inviting people to join me over there. I'm writing about many topics that are around our transformational processes in life, and in particular, how they relate to our life of work in the world and what we're doing, how we're making decisions. Status is a huge part of that. There's more coming out on that topic as well that I've been working on. So every other week, they're more longer form essays. I'm kind of clipping up to 5,000 words. So I'm taking the time to dive into these topics and do some, through my own storytelling of my own life, and to dive into some of these concepts. So join me over at Substack.
I love it.
Give you moments of reflection for sure.
Excellent. And that's DS Leadership?
Yeah,
right?
at DS Leadership Life. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes. And of course, check out the show notes.
Yeah.
And then my call to action for you this week is values exercise. I talked about it almost in depth in the earlier part of this. Here's what I want you to know. I picked that up at Date with Destiny. It is a 6-day event with Tony Robbins. The least costly version of this, the lowest investment starts at $5,500. And I will tell you, there's a lot of insight, a lot of value. Definitely got my money's worth out of this. However, this moving towards and moving away values exercise alone is worth 10 times the amount that it cost me to go through Date with Destiny.
Yeah.
I have since used it with hundreds of my one-on-one coaching clients and group coaching clients, and I have developed an entire document that will walk you through exactly how to do this exercise that will transform your experience of life by taking your default values that you automatically, organically, unconsciously chose throughout your lifetime. And you'll see why your life is the way it is today. And should you choose to do so, part B, or the second half of the exercise, is you consciously creating your rules and values moving forward. I will give you my document, step-by-step instructions for free. For free. If you email me at cliff@cliffravenscraft.com and put values exercise in the subject line.
There you go. You can get your hands on it. Do it yourself.
Exactly.
I love it.
But only if you want your life to change.
Yeah. If you want to stay the same, don't. Only if you want to continue to make the wrong decision. Just kidding.
I love it. All right. Until next time, Daphne, what do we want people to do?
Keep choosing your own adventure.